England's finest.
I'm kind of stuck at the moment, waiting for other people to finish work so that I can finish work. So I thought I'd just make a video that nobody would watch and show you around. That big cat in the previous section, that's my older cat, Charlie. And this little bastard is called Nick, short for Nikola, after Nikola Tesla. And he sure loves that tap water. Weirdo. So I live in a bungalow, inherited from my grandparents, deep in the English countryside. Basically, Hobbiton. It's a pretty nice patch, got a big garden that I never use, with a huge amount of lovely moss all over the ground there, which I love very much. We have junky old sheds full of my granddad's old crap, still. There used to be some more sheds down the bottom, and there was a rather lovely old motorbike, which I wish we hadn't sold. Or at least hadn't sold as cheaply as we did. So yeah, I mean, he used to use it as a kitchen garden, but I'm just not the gardening type. So occasionally I'll sit out under the shade of one of the apple trees and work. But that's about it. And it backs onto the recreation ground, which means we get a lot of footballs and empty lager cans flung over the fence, which is, you know, lovely. They don't maintain the roads much out here, but they just did this new-fangled surface treatment that's not really a proper treatment, so we'll see how that goes, but it's pothole palooza otherwise. The Bourne rivulet runs through the village several times and is usually full of gang-raping ducks and the occasional kingfisher. There's an egret that likes to wander around as well. None of these were in evidence, but apparently there were mass mobs of ducklings just before I got there. Just my luck. There's plenty of nice places to walk around the village, and about half the time I help my mother when she goes out and walks her dog. And this is one of the routes we take up on one of the hills. We're in a valley between some chalk hills, so that's why you get all this rolling countryside around here. I spared you the dead badger that was on the side of the road and waited until I got past it and got my breath back to make this recording. Poor old thing. That's the country. There's loads of building going on, and this plot of land just got sold, so those blocks are to keep gypsies and travellers from going into the field, by the way. Sunshine and the outdoors are not the Grimm's natural habitat. He does not appreciate them, which is why he is squinting, even though he's also wearing a hat and sunglasses. And yes, that's the selfie stick, but I bought it because it's a cheap tripod, basically, for doing my YouTube videos, so don't give me any shit, wankers. In the far distance, you might be able to make out some horses. These are from a stud farm, so if you like to watch horses fucking from a vast distance, this is the spot to do it from. Chalk hills are kind of like a teardrop that's been pressed into the earth, so you get steep gradients one side, and then you get smooth gradients the other. This is the steeper part. These banks were covered in masses of daffodils, you know, just a few days ago. Now it's mostly dandelions and celestines and daisies and shit. Narrow. Car comes, dive into the hedge. Such fun. Parts of the rivulet are seasonal, so water only flows part of the year. Usually it's come up here by now, so it's a little bit late this year, but yeah, this ditch you may keep seeing in these pictures is actually the rivulet. And it's fairly deep and fairly fast flowing once it's up. Now this here is the old Methodist chapel, which is completely in disuse now, though it is still a Pokestop, which is, you know, good or something, I suppose. Yeah, that's near to the school. There's one interesting thing here on the thatched house over to the side. If you take a look up the top, I'll zoom in a second, but you should be able to make out on the thatch there's bunnies. So I don't know how well you can make it out, but up there there's, not bunnies, hares, two battling hares in thatch on top of the roof. And a lot of thatched houses have these extra decorations on top, usually ducks or pheasants or swans, corn dollies, that sort of thing. It's a way for thatchers to show off their art. Not that many thatchers are up to snuff anymore, quite shoddy work. So when the river is all the way up, this tree, the water flows through its roots, and that's why there's all those twigs there. They get caught up when the river's flowing and then just stay there when it dries up. So this rather unimpressive ditch is actually a fairly impressive river, deep enough that they used to have raft races for kids and stuff down it, but it hasn't been as early or as deep for some time. And this is goosegrass, which grows everywhere, is apparently edible, but more hilariously, sticks to anything. Ha ha ha, such fun. So much fun, especially when it sticks to pets. More ditch, which will be a river one day when it grows up. It has dreams, I promise you. But up ahead, you should be able to see a pair of breeze blocks, which are either improvised stepping stones, which seems likely given that's a field over there, or kids tried to dam the river up in the past. We certainly used to do that. People got very, very annoyed. I really like this stretch of road, this way to walk up here, because it's really quiet and there's all these really interesting gnarled trees all the way down the side of it. Up this hill, which there's no way in fuck I'm walking up because it's usually ripe with horse shit, is a house that we always thought was haunted and was abandoned for years and years and years and years and years. Kids used to break into there. We went up there one time, and in one of the sheds we found a bunch of old burnt occult books, so maybe there was something going on there after all. Who knows? See what I mean about the trees? I mean, come on, look at this shit. How weird looking is this stuff? I just love it up here. I guess it's a combination of farming and trimming them back, and the river, the soft soil, the animals. There's quite often cows, sheep and whatever in the fields. I guess all of that combines just to make really interesting, weird looking trees. Speaking of which, here's my favourite. This tree was struck by lightning. Now one half of it's dead, the other half is still growing. Apparently that's good for wands, so if any of you Wiccans want to buy any lightning struck wood, hit me up. It'll only cost you a lot of money and shipping, and wood lice. And now here's some concrete mushrooms. I don't know why concrete mushrooms. Apparently it was a trend in the 70s and 80s, like avocado bathrooms and filofaxes, but lots of people have them. We used to cycle up here and then fish around in the river with jars and find caddisfly larvae and bullheads and a citadel miniature once, which was a great find. But not as good as the things we found under this bridge, which included a rather lurid girl's diary that she'd apparently thrown away, and a big stash of porn. I guess they were hoping the waters would come up and wash them away, but we got there first. Early practice for being a troll. This mill pond was supposedly haunted. Apparently a horse drowned in it. There were bones when it dried out, and the flint around the outside always had this weird sheen on it from the algae, I suppose. I once carved my name and that of a girl I fancied into this ancient bench, which doesn't seem to have been replaced, in the hopes that she'd notice. She never did notice, of course. Also, I put a big bag of gummy bears in her drawer in primary school as a kind of love note thing. Didn't even say anything about it, just ate them all, never even asked who gave them to her. Fat bitch. Some fine old crafting here, some hazel fencing. Hazel is also good for cutting switches if you need to punish a bad child or reward a good girl. Now if you look very closely and carefully through this hedge, you may just be able to spot a rather indignant cat. Okay, this is quite interesting, at least to me. You'll probably see there's a lot of ivy around. If you want to kill ivy before it kills a tree, you chop it across the middle and uproot it, because otherwise it'll grow down or grow up. You need to make sure it's dead. fair few houses out here are converted farm buildings. So this used to be an old wooden barn, and then they turned it into a house. Lovely. This is like the minimum safe distance I like to be from horses, because all horses are bastards and will fuck you up as soon as look at you. So yeah, I have a restraining order on these horses. This is my old primary school, which was both heaven and hell. We didn't have all these fancy playthings there, we just had some scaffolding poles to climb as a climbing frame. That straight road out front is an old Roman road, and we quite regularly find Roman coins digging around with sticks in the dirt, so that was fun. So this old track up behind the school, it's up into the woods on top of the hill, and this is very much our old stomping ground. This field here used to be a sort of scrapyard of sorts, and we would drag all kinds of shit out of there to make dens in the woods. And then we would fight other kids over their dens, and we would raid each other's dens for scrap to make our dens even better. So, you know, you might talk about your harsh urban childhood with your gang fights and your shootings and your smoking crack or whatever. We were risking tetanus and shooting actual arrows at each other. And when we weren't doing that, we were having cowpat fights. What you do is you find a nice crusty cowpat, you stick a stick into it, and you use the stick to hurl it at your opponent. And if you're lucky, it's only crusty on the outside, and inside is all moist and green and gooey and splats satisfyingly all over them. So yeah, that's what we were doing. Oh, and riding motorbikes too. You know, little scrappy crappy ones. I remember one particular incident where one of the bikes was overheating, and one of the kids thought it would be a fantastic idea to piss on it to cool the engine down. Which he did, and it cooled down, and then he went off riding on the bike again, and the engine heated up, and a big cloud of piss basically enveloped him and made him stink. So, you know, that was fun. We also found a bunch of stolen tools up here once, and ran into a young couple who backed their car up onto the track to have sex. That was an educational evening, I can tell you. I guess you can see, looking at the landscape, why I kind of fell in love with fantasy books when I was a kid. You know, Lion, Witch and the Wardrobe and The Lord of the Rings. I used to bring a tiny little transistor radio up here when they were running the rerun of the old Lord of the Rings radio series. I would sit in a little meadow bit up there and listen to it there. Definitely enhanced the experience, I think. Very much enjoyed it. But I think you can see why I refer to this whole area as being like Hobbiton. We're not actually that far from kind of Oxford Way, which was the area that Tolkien was inspired by writing about those sorts of things. The other villages are definitely hobbits. So the landowner up here has suddenly decided to make a big fuss over everything. So they've installed these massive fences either side of the path. If you don't live in the country, you don't know how contentious public footpaths can be. But yeah, so this one goes all the way up to the top of the hill that looks down over the lake and most of the village. And they've put this fence all the way up, and it's a rather interesting solution to it being an angle, is to put the gate at an angle, I suppose. So, you know, kudos on that. But the other thing that they've done that's upset a lot of people is they've really stripped back the woods. These used to be a lot denser. I'll use the outro sequence that I shot up here so you can see kind of how it used to be. But all along this path where you've now got this fence, there used to be trees kind of both sides, and you would peek through and see down the hill, and you had this kind of natural arbour of trees above you. They've also thinned all this out massively. Apparently it's all according to some National Trust scheme or something that's supposed to help bluebells and other flowers and so on grow up here, but they were already growing up there fine. I think they need a bit more cover. All they seem to have really accomplished here is to destroy a bunch of really old trees, ruin the experience of walking up here, and remove a lot of habitat for birds and animals. So yeah, I don't know. I just seem to be doing shit for the sake of it, and yeah, it's upset a lot of people, me included. There's a lot of change going on in a lot of villages. I think a lot of new building going on, a lot of greenfield sites, a lot of people being a lot more assertive over their property, I guess. I mean, I guess that's their right, but I think in communities like this you probably have some sense of responsibility. I mean, this was a bit of a tourist attraction because it links up to Test Way and all sorts of things like that. That's been lost. You can see the chalk in the ground, walking on the bones of the ancient times. This is the main conker tree for the village. Kids fighting over the conkers could get quite competitive. I think we chased an Australian kid called Darren Gammy up a tree with our cowpat sticks once. Poor sod. One thing that's good about the village is that we have our own doctor's surgery, which this is, though it is usually overcrowded with old people desperately trying to delay the inevitable, so it can be quite hard to be seen, unfortunately. Another bridge spot, this time with some water and not just a grassy ditch. Aren't you lucky? You can usually see some fish here, and the couple of times I've seen kingfishers, it's been around here. And that leads all the way down to the watercress beds, which are fairly famous and a fairly big deal. Our churchyard is pretty lovely. I like to take a lot of pictures here. Loads of wildflowers grow up at the back, cowslips and stuff, which are pretty rare, so you know, it's nice to have a nice semi-untouched spot in the middle of the village. Little wonder I grew up gothy with all these old graves and stuff around, I suppose. Some really nice cats that hang out in the churchyard as well, and it seems to be a popular spot for them. And lots of yew trees, of course, as a symbol of everlasting life or some shit like that. I do like them. Something about them. Not sure what. Now this may simply look like a rotting stump to you, but I assure you that it is actually a sculpture. Supposedly. Something religious, maybe Mary and Child, I don't know, but someone paid good money for this rotting stump as a statue. This is a great house, half underground in the churchyard, so you know, if you want a front row seat for the undead apocalypse, that's the place to be. But this is my favourite thing, possibly in the whole village, this ancient yew tree with this great massive hollow in it. It's just so gnarled and fantastic. You know, you think Yoda should be in here or something. I just really love it. If you ever come by the village, make sure you stop and see that. The whole churchyard's worth seeing, to be honest. Remarkably, I didn't catch fire setting foot on holy ground, so you get to see inside. This is one of only 3 black marble fonts of its like found anywhere, and we have one of them. And it's a lovely old heavy slab of stone. Another thing that's worth seeing. It's not particularly intricate, it's just got this kind of white and gravitas to it. Just right for drowning babies. The village square, where kids hang out when they want to look tough, rev their motorcycles. That thatched cottage there is usually infested with white doves that shit everywhere, regularly get hit by traffic, and are slowly eating the wall of the vicarage to fill their crops so they can digest seed, so yeah, that's fun. One of the pubs, the George, was just over there. We have 3 pubs, one of which is currently shut. 3 pubs, 1 small village, that's the Brits for you. Some more of the river. Still no ducklings, though I am assured that they're out there somewhere. That's a nice house. That one's half buried in the river instead of being half buried in the graveyard. I'm not sure which is better. And then home again, jiggity jig. Well, I hope that's given you some sort of insight into where I live. This is where I grew up as well. I spend some time away in Basingstoke, of all places, living. But, yeah, what are you going to do? This lazy fuck hasn't moved since I left. I was gone 2 hours, 2.5 hours walking. Lazy sod. Look at his beans. And the other one's drunk his fill, obviously, and is now lounging in the sun. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this nothing of a video with me touring you around my village. I know some of you think it's pretty or something. It's pretty boring. Zang.
Stop.